9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. Today, I've got a special co-host, our own David Reeploeg, our Vice President of Federal Programs. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
And it's really awesome that we're both wearing the same TRIDEC uniform.
You're very well coordinated this morning.
By any means. And we're really happy to welcome this morning Bob Wilkinson, the President of HMIS and formerly MSA, and we'll talk about that transition. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, we'll start off with our Coffee with Karl tradition on talking about our coffee or mug. And because I'm completely out of mugs, I need some more. I'm just going to talk about this one that I got from Energy Northwest when they had their energy summit about a month ago. It was really awesome. And obviously Energy Northwest is a great TRIDEC partner and member. And we're really excited that they made an announcement just last week about the new solar farm that's coming in on the 300 acres that was transferred through TRIDEC in the past. So I want to give them a shout out this morning, and let anybody know that's watching, if you do have a mug that you'd like us to talk about your organization, just send it in or let us know. So Bob, what do you got for a mug or coffee story this morning?
Well, I was told it was supposed to be what your normal mug is, or something that goes along with those.
Yeah.
So I brought two mugs. This is my normal coffee mug because I'm either too lazy or because I always forget or because I'm in too much of a rush to do anything different than that. But in light of you wanted the mug, I'll do my weekend mug that I always do. So go Hawks, right? So
Go Hawks.
I like to watch sports as a way to calm me, although I don't know watching Seahawks games as a way of calming anybody the way they actually like to make it a barn burner at the end. But so those are my two mugs. I'm not a huge coffee drinker by nature, although I've been kind of converting over that over the last few years because I'm such an early bird in the morning. So anyways, that's I'm a cardboard kind of coffee person.
That's awesome. I'll just tell a quick story before we go to David. I don't know, it's like a long time ago now. I used to work for Caterpillar back in the Midwest, and I'd never seen like a coffee machine, with like the cup comes down and the grounds pour in and they put hot water in and it kind of mixes up. But like, it was the thing, everybody like, hey, let me buy a cup of coffee, and it's like that kind of a setup. And it was totally that cardboard cup, but it's after a while you kind of get used to it. So I got, mad props for the cardboard cup, and, it's like whatever works for you, right?
Yeah.
David, how about you? What's your mug today?
My mug is from let's see if I can show it, the Volpentest Hammer Federal Training Center.
All right.
And if folks are not familiar with the Hammer Federal Training Center, it is now over 20 years old, and it was created really to focus on improving Hanford worker safety and training. And that was that was a project that was spearheaded really by one of TriDex co-founders, Sam Volpentest, and therefore now it's been named the Volpentest Hammer Federal Training Center. And it's a great partnership between the Hanford site management, tribes, labor unions, and really, I think, a nice legacy that TRIDEC has been able to be a part of. And why it's relevant here is because Hammer is operated currently by MSA and will be operated by HMIS in the future.
And David, thanks for calling out Hammer on that. And, the TRIDEC partnership is a big deal. I for the folks that are actually at Hammer in all this COVID stuff that we've been going through, they end up being the pointy end of the stick, the spear, for lack of a better thing, as we started to come back into operations, kind of as we went down for a while. And it just massively overloaded our, training fell well behind schedule. And so they have been on the front line, for lack of a better thing, for us as Hanford to get back in operations, and they've been incredible, right? The worker trainers, they're craft folks by nature, right? They come down there to do this, and they do it by their passion and by what they want to do. And they're on day one or day two or day five, theoretically, of somebody coming back to the Hanford site in their early ages of all this COVID stuff, that they have to explain to them the reasons why we're doing social distancing and protecting them and wearing masks and all that type of stuff. And I'll tell you what, man, they've knocked the ball out of the park. To say it was impressive is an understatement. So thanks.
And I've had a chance to attend a number of. I'm on the steering committee, and I've had a chance to attend a number of their steering committee meetings and talk to folks from DOE headquarters and talk to folks from other sites and other federal agencies even. And Hammer really has been the model for the last 20 years of how to do training right. And the worker trainer model that they use, where you have folks who do the job every day and they come back and train their colleagues, I think that's been proven to be very effective. So yeah, great team of people over there.
All right. Well, for anybody that's tuned in on the Zoom, we will use the question and answer feature. If you have a question for Bob, we'll work it into the conversation and get to it. If you're watching us on social media, you can put your question in the comment, and like I say, we'll work those into our conversation. So Bob, let's start off with you. And although we spent a little bit of time together in Olympia, what seems like last year, but I guess it was this year back in March. What's the Bob Wilkinson story, or where are you from, and kind of how did you get to where you're at today?
Well, but I have an exciting story. This will be short and quick. No, well, so I'm I'll say pretty much a long-term Tri-Citian, right? So I went through middle school and high school here in the Tri-Cities and a little bit of my elementary school. And ultimately, I guess my family, when I first started as a kid, I'm from Wyoming and Colorado area, Cheyenne, Wyoming area. And I always tell the joke, when I was a little kid, I spent my first 5 years of my life. I think I was about 5 years old when I got my first tennis shoes. Before that, I only wore cowboy boots. So that's what I wanted to be when I was a young kid, and that was everything I wanted to be. But anyway, so grew up in the Tri-Cities, loved the Tri-Cities area. I graduated Kennewick High School, go Lions. And to be honest with you, at the time, I was really on the fence when I was graduating high school on what I want to do in my life, like everybody, right? And it was all over the map. And I wanted to be one of the things I wanted to be was a fighter pilot, wanted to fly planes, and was approached at that time by West Point to be able to play some sports with them, and was contemplating doing that. And I was really close to going West Point, all the way up to the point I had everything pretty much done, all the way through the governor and all the appointments and all those type of things, but they wouldn't let me fly, in part because I have glasses, right? So now you go get the surgery, but back in the day, you couldn't have the surgery. And so I wanted to fly the A-10 Warthog so I could, be a tank killing jet type of thing. And so I ended up diverting over and going to Montana State University, back to my cowboy stage, right? So, hey, I could go there, was offered an opportunity to play some sports while I was there. And my secondary passion was I wanted to play professional football. And so I went there to play some college football, and not big enough, fast enough, strong enough, I don't know what it is to make it to the final gate to get there, but I was clearly not there. So I was fortunate enough that in order, at the time, school was important enough for me to do well, but not important enough for me to really care, because it was a secondary part. But I was smart enough to know that when I went off to college that I wanted to do something that interested me. And I was now when I get to college, I was at the crossroads. Do I want to be a teacher and become a coach because I play sports, and that was kind of one of my passions, or was I more in the pursuit of taking care of myself and my family, and maybe go into more of a technical field and in engineering? And I was going to go into engineering right out of college. Right when I went into college, I kind of made that decision at that point, and got convinced otherwise by my recruitment and my counselors that said, you're going to play sports and you're going to get an engineering degree, so let me educate you on how this is going to work. So they take me through the whole scenario of how many hours do you study, how many hours will you have practice, how many hours will you have lifting time, how many hours will you have to brush your teeth. And so they go through this whole scenario. It takes them about 5 or 10 minutes, and then they sum up my day, and I'm at 26 hours on a 24-hour day, and I hadn't slept yet. So I started my college career in general studies, slowly but surely morphed my way into a business class. The business class had a calculus class that was also an engineering class, and it wasn't that hard and that horrible. And so then I took another engineering course, and I decided, well, I'm going to go try being an engineer. And I went into mechanical engineering and didn't really like the mechanical side of it. It was more of a professor I didn't like. I took electrical engineering course and really liked the electrical engineering professor, and voila, one thing led to another, and I gritted out 5.5 years to get my electrical engineering degree and graduated with electrical engineering degree. During that tenure, at the end of it, was off like everybody, college kids, all looking for an internship or some way to get some experience, eventually get a job, and was got an internship with Westinghouse at Hanford one summer, and came out here to work at, of all places, a tea plant, the canyon facility in the middle of the Central West Plateau that at the time was doing decontaminated structures, buildings, vehicles, those type of things, and we were free releasing them back into the society. And so I did that during my kind of my internship. And at the end of my internship, they offered me a job. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm moving back to the Tri-Cities. I want to go see the world. I'm, young and I'm loving it. And at the end of the day, when it all settled out, 4 months later, when I got done with my degree, they were the best offer I had on the table. And so I said, I'm going to go work at Hanford. Came out on it to Hanford, started at Hanford, and I was only going to work for a year or two because why? I wanted to travel around and see the world. Yeah. One thing led to another. I met my wife, who's also a Tri-City native from the Richland, but I never knew her when we were kids. I met her at the Hanford side of all things. She was in the occupational medical thing. And I always tell a funny story is she was the person that went around as part of that and did a back reduction program and also did wellness checks. So they'd come around to our places and do body fat checks. And at the time I was still fairly in shape from playing sports and had a pretty low body fat. And so we always joke, and a lot of people reference my wife for the longest time as the fat lady because she did the body fat test. So, but that's how I met her. And one thing led to another. And I think I attracted her because I had low body fat, and now I don't have that anymore. So, so I've lost that capacity or capability. But anyways, long story short, started out here in that career and started in project management, got thrown into the wolves right out of the gate. I joined a group that had about 5 different project managers, and they all within the first year had greater opportunities where they all left. And so I'm within 1 year out of college and was supposed to get like a little menial task. And now I'm running 5 or 6, $5 to $8 million projects, totaling about $45 to $50 million. So I'm thrown to the wolves right out of the gate and survived my first year, thank God. Survived by a lot of good people around me that helped me an enormous amount. And then I went from there got offered to go into operations and started as ops engineer, then ops supervisor, then an ops manager, then a facility manager. And then I just kind of had opportunities that's presented themselves. I moved around the Hanford reservation in just about every role. So I'm kind of, it's either good or bad. Maybe I'm a gypsy or maybe I got kicked to the corner. I don't know, but spent a lot of my time in different segments of all of Hanford. And ultimately that allowed me an opportunity to come over here to MSA about 5 years ago as the COO, and Mission Support Alliance's role now, Hanford Mission Integration Solutions here in the very near future, is to provide services to the other contractor. And part of the reason why I got asked to come over was they brought a new president in before me, my predecessor, Bill Johnson, wonderful man, super smart, but never been at Hanford before. And so they wanted to have somebody that actually had Hanford backing or experience to kind of meld the two together well. And so because I'd been kind of all over the landscape and knew all that, they thought it was a decent marriage. And for me, it was a great opportunity. It worked out really well. And, did that for a few years, and then Bill moved on and I got this opportunity to move up to this role. And so it's been kind of, I wouldn't say a fairy tale because I never thought I would get to this level, never wanted to get to this level. And there are days where I love being at this level and hours where I hate being at this level. I think it just kind of comes with the territory for the job. But the people over here are incredible folks. Hanford folks and just in general are incredible. Even though sometimes we take a beating out in the normal industry area, but they're some of the most talented people in the world, no matter what category they're in. So long wandering who I am, where I am. I think part of the reason why I ultimately ended up in this role, it gets back to where my decision to coach or not coach to be a football team is, probably the thing that as I'm now in my early 50s, I've come to the conclusion of where my passion's at. And I really love teams, building teams, working around teams, associated that with sports in my younger life. Now my older life is just getting people together and allow people to kind of be aligned together, work together, have that relationship part of that. And really this role has allowed me to kind of to do what I love, right, from that perspective. So.
No, totally. And I think it's a perfect analogy. And I appreciate you sharing that because, it's one of the things we like to talk about, especially as we come out of COVID. workforce and training and skills, whether it's a educational pathway or more of a skilled pathway, is something that we like to talk about, because we all have our own story. And so many times for young people, the opportunity, what they can do with their career is based on proximity, right? And I think that's the great thing about the Tri-Cities is, like, you didn't intend to come back here, but this is where the opportunities are. And so, while kids are going through the school system, to connect them with local jobs and careers and have them see that and see what that is, that's a huge part of the thing. Because, if you're out in a smaller community or someplace that doesn't have the employment base that we do, you don't get that opportunity. So I appreciate your story, and I'll have to give you a shout out to the Big Sky, because I'm a Idaho Vandal, and we won't talk about that back in the late 80s when we were there, but that's okay. I will talk about Bozeman though. I mean, like, what a huge transformation from back in the day, right? Like, it's just a totally different place with the technology startups and stuff that they have there, which is amazing.
Yeah, it went from a small cowboy community, kind of farm community, to now it's kind of almost got a bend feel to it, right? It's got kind of a, last time I was there, it's got a hybrid between a really high-end rich society part of it while still having the cowboy piece. Yeah. And they've kind of been, it's interesting to see the two kind of slamming together there. And it's been quite an interesting change, right? From that perspective. But, your comment on the letting people know about their local things. That's one, I'm on STEM Foundation. That's one of the things that my wife's a school teacher, and there's a, Tri-Cities, and we at Hanford, we have a hard time sometimes attracting outside talent to come to our area, because they look at the Tri-Cities and go, wow, there's only trees by the river, right? And everything else looks like a desolate desert, right? And even some people that come in and move in, a lot of times they move in, and we've had a lot of boomerangs where they come in and spend a year or two and go, I can't take this, I'm leaving. And then they come back around a few years later and go, the grass really wasn't greener. All right. Produce. And so what we've been seeing though, is we're really successful with people that we can keep in the local community, about staying in the local community. And there's a lot of young kids that we could tap potential opportunities across the spectrum, should they know what they are at the right time in their life and be able to take advantage of that, right? And a lot of our kids in the Tri-City community don't have the ability to do like what I was able to do, leave the area. They just can't. They financially don't have the wherewithal, and so they have to leverage the CBCs and WSUs to see what those opportunities. If they don't see them early enough, they let that pass by, and they don't take care of that. So there's so much opportunity available to our kids that we got to help with, right?
Yeah, totally. No, that's a great point. Well, you talked a little bit about MSA and then the transition to HMIS, but can you kind of give us that overview about what does MSA and soon to be HMIS do? What part of Hanford do they cover? And then maybe talk a little bit about the transition, how it's going, and what some of those timelines are, Bob.
Yeah, sure. So Mission Support Alliance's contract is, we're the site service provider that provides the site services to the Hanford site. And the easiest way to make that analogy is we provide all your equivalent city services. And I say city services on steroids, because it's all the things you get from your city, on top of the fact that we then also to offer to the Hanford site specialized craft resources that they can buy by the drink, right? So we give all your city services, give very specialized craft in different areas. And we also give a lot of our additional services, things like phone coverage, cell phone coverages, radio coverages, copier. I mean, just weird things like that we set up stuff, right? So it's kind of city services on steroids. Under the next contract, under Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, we're doing a lot of the same things. I think the difference is, and you can get it by the titles of the companies, I think it jumps out. Mission Support Alliance was the company name for the 10 years. The new one is Hanford Mission Integration Solutions. The difference is mission support and mission integrations. I think the new contract really is stepping up what the intent of the mission support contract that was at the beginning, which culturally has been kind of something that's been in flow. And with what's gone on recently with DOE is really the opportunity to make this is we're still doing all those city services, doing them on steroids, but there's a huge part that we've just really started tapping about helping to really integrate this large Hanford landscape, multiple prime contractors, to the Department of Energy offices, multiple tribes, multiple stakeholders in the state and federal. And this really next contract is for us to really build upon that integration and take maybe in some cases manual and discrepant data flow streams to be able to assemble them together to allow the department and ultimately the government to make the right decisions to get the Hanford site cleaned up. And so that's really going to be our emphasis on this next contract, different than MSA. And there's been a lot of great groundwork laid out in the last year or two, really with the Department of Energy, right? You got the Department of Energy Richland Operations, Department of Energy Office of River Protection that were always separated by church and state. And then recently, Brian Vance was put in the acting role and then eventually became the permanent role for that. And his job was also to start integrating those two offices together. And so he's laid a lot of groundwork that we're going to be able to pick up and move out on. And so we're kind of excited about that. We bid towards that. It aligns really well with their acceptance from us of the new contract, and the two come together. Culturally, that's still going to be a pretty big shift for us as Hanford in general. We still got some culture shift to go with that. So that's probably one of the biggest things on our contract. The second largest thing is this contracting mechanism does have a lot of requirements for small business. Mission Support Alliance did have a lot of contracts for small business also, but they're different in the way that we manage and will manage them. Mission Support Alliance did a lot of staff augmentation, which is basically you buy a person and you pay for that person. Under a Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, there's a big emphasis to take staff aug and change it to a task-based subcontract, which culturally is going to be different for our community. And there's a lot of different requirements that go into that, stringent requirements to make sure we're doing ethically and compliantly and everything that goes with that. So we're spending a lot of time working with our local community and our subcontractors, that are small business subcontractors out there, to make them aware. CPCC contract that's coming at the same time is going to have the same thing. But that culturally is we're going to feel that wave or that ripple through the Hanford site. There's good reason behind it, but it is going to great opportunities, but it's also going to be hard too at the same time for us to get used to. So, yeah. So that's kind of everything in the mix. From a transition perspective, we're in the throes of that transition right now. We plan to flip the switch over on January 25th. So January 24th will be Mission Support Alliance. January 25th will be Hanford Mission Integration Solutions. We're doing really well in all of the preparatory stuff that goes with that. We have a bunch of due diligence walkdowns, looking at systems and processes and people and equipment and the contract and anything that's different, and reconciling that. So we're kind of on the tail end of most of that. Probably 95% complete with that. And has allowed us to start going out and making both job offers and start putting subcontracts out there on the street that we're not going to be able to novate over, that we're going to have to go out for rebid. And so those are well in the throes. We just made management offers last week and had them right before Thanksgiving, and had them all accepted on Monday, got those all done. And next week, we're planning to start going out with our first suite of job offers to the Mission Support Alliance folks that are going to roll over to Hanford Mission Integration. So we're right on track where we need to be. Transitions is a roller coaster ride, I'd say, probably is the easiest way to say that, as we get working through. There's a lot of highs and lows that comes with that, but I think we're right where we need to be in that roller coaster ride. So,
and Bob, you mentioned the sort of new contract structure with the task orders, and in some respects, this is part of a larger DOE sort of change in approach to contracting, and in some respects, we're going to be the guinea pigs at Hanford. But I appreciate what you had to say there. And one other thing that I've heard you say.
Hey, David, I did want to clarify though. I don't know if it's fair to say it's DOE. I mean, I think it's a little fairer to say that a lot of this contracting strategy has been driven over the last few years by a lot of IG audits that have come across that really have brought concerns in when you do staff augmentation about a co-mingling or a co-employment. And that's been identified by the IG through the department, eventually to some of the contractors out on the Hanford site. We've all kind of lived through painfully and seen in the paper to a degree. And so, this shift in focus is to make sure that we all collectively are compliant to that and beholden to the taxpayers. And so, I think the department would just as soon have life as easy as it was before, but it's not. That's not an opportunity to do that because of those concerns in that regard. And so it's just a shift in that focus for all of us. But culturally, it's been hard, I think, for everybody, for the department, for the contractors, and for the subcontractors to be dealing with as we're going through that.
And speaking of culture, and I heard you say this before, and I think it's a good way of describing what MSA has done and what HMIS will do, and that you're sort of the site enabler. You enable all of the other work to happen at the Hanford site. And we know that the direct feed low activity waste facility will be up and running in the next few years, and there will also be a pretty significant culture shift at the Hanford site going back to sort of operational status. And so can you kind of share your thoughts on how that transition will work, and specifically as it relates to HMIS and sort of the role that HMIS will play at the Hanford site during that transition?
You're talking about the transition to DF-law operations?
Operations, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. There's a couple things, and you hit it to a degree. Our services that MSA provided, the HMIS will provide it is services that allow folks to kind of buy by the drink. And I think that to a degree is important. Ultimately we exist to enable others to be successful, right? The CHPRC contract right now, and the WERPS tank farms contract, and the BNI contract as it goes operations here in the near future, the CPCC contract, right? So when you get right down to it, it says, how do we define our success? Ultimately, our success is not by causing turbulence in other areas and really watching the others be successful, right? I mean, so back to the team approach, right? We're for lack of a better thing, we're a little bit of the offensive linemen on a football team that are blocking while we watch the running back and quarterback score the touchdown, right? So that's our role to provide. And it's an important role because you could take for granted that if your lights aren't on, or your water doesn't come, or your IT systems don't work. To make sure that we, where it's kind of interesting is, I call this a healthy tension model, in that when you get a buy by the drink or buy by the services, you don't quite have too much of any one thing and just too little of anything, right? So you're always looking for that sweet spot. It's the Goldilocks and the three bears scenario, right? The service is not too big, not too small, but just right. And so you're always looking for that, and that healthy tension model sometimes causes some tension. But what it does is it allows our contract not to spend maximum amounts of money so that the other contractors can spend the money in the areas that you want to spend. So that's kind of the predominant part of that. Where this, back to your question, David, on really is, how do you see this transitioning is, the Hanford site is going through a culture shift back into what I'll call back into operations, right? So the Hanford site operated back when I first got here, was just finishing up operations, and then kind of went into a caretaker mode for 15 or 20 years. When you're in a caretaker mode, you can afford to have things happen and take your time at stuff and have more diligence. When you go into an operations mode, and you got DF law running where you can't have the systems down for more than a few hours or so, everything around that periphery has to adapt to that. For us, you can't have the lights off for more than a couple hours. You can't have a water supply off for more than a day, and so you have to reassess everything top to bottom. Do you have the right skill mix? Do you have the right people? Are they in the right place? Are they in the right place at the right time? Is the equipment in the right state of mind to be able to deal with that? And when the equipment has a problem, are you in the right state of mind to be able to adapt to that? And that culture shift doesn't happen overnight. And in some cases, it doesn't happen overnight because if we've been in this caretaker state for 15 or 20 years, there's a lot of people out here that don't know what they don't know, right? Because they haven't lived through that midnight call that the systems went down in whatever their areas go. So for us, the emphasis is, what are we going to look like or adapt to on a 24/7 basis when that phone call comes in at 2 a.m. and you can't wait till Monday morning? You've got to get it fixed at, Saturday night in the middle of a Gonzaga basketball game. Okay, right here, we're ready and we're going to roll with that. And that takes some time culturally to get there, in getting people's minds to shift around and be ready to do that. And so that for the next couple of years, that's really going to be our collective focus. DF Law, BNI, as they start that commissioning, everybody is very attuned to what they're doing, and that's hard all in itself. But everybody else at Hanford plays a factor into that will make them successful or not successful based on how we interact around the periphery of it. we can blow them up quicker than they can harm themselves, kind of thing. So.
Maybe another question, and I was thinking about what you were saying about just the importance of kind of engaging with younger people in STEM Foundation, and one of the things that TRIDEC has partnered with MSA on in the past is Connect TriCities, and I think that was an example, really good example of sort of identifying opportunities for win-wins for both the Hanford site, for MSA, and for the community, and for the folks around here. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on where there might be opportunities in the future, both in terms of engaging with, helping to build a workforce of the future, but obviously TRIDEC is also an economic development organization. We're really interested in growing the economy, and where there might be any other opportunities for the Hanford site more broadly to partner with the community on some more of those sort of win-win opportunities.
Yeah, so a big part of our bid was community involvement, right? So we committed $10 million spent over the 10-year period. And every prime contractor out here will have that as they come online. And I think the key to that, David, is I think with the Connect Tri-Cities, I think we just touched what is possible in that regard. I think we just barely got kicked off and started, and unfortunately COVID's kind of hurt a little bit. Some of these bids has kind of set us back, but Bob's opinion, philosophically perspective is, I think our development of our talent in our community is everybody gets benefit by that. And I think you're seeing that as mentality wise by the prime contractors on the site. And I think even by the community, our community commitment is things that go off to make sure that we bring talent in. That talent doesn't have to mean that HMIS is the only beneficiary of that. It could be the other prime contractors. It could be the community, in part because we move people around, especially young in their careers. We have a new talent pool coming in that want more opportunities on a more frequent basis. And in some cases they get those, they're going to have to bump companies and move around companies to do that. I unfortunately had that same scenario when I was growing up, where I moved a few companies, but I boomeranged back in. And I think we need to continue to have that mentality is when we have a young 25-year-old who's ready for an opportunity, if we don't have it and they have it with another company, we should encourage that with the hope that we can get them back maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years later with even a more robust, capable person to go do that. And so, that's kind of a long way to say is we plan to take the Connect Tri-Cities and see how we can continue to evolve that. We are working with WSU Tri-Cities on some opportunities to say, how do we develop people and talent-wise to allow them, while companies like ours, we give a massive amounts of training to our folks, right? How do we use that massive amounts of internal training that we do that then catapults them into a way that they get either certifications and or follow-on degree programs in a way that allows them to continue to develop as individuals and show that on their resume such that it's opportunity to be able to bring out to a larger pool. And I think we just all benefit by that. So there's so many different ways. And I think it's just, we're just gonna have to continue to be creative and forceful in our creativity and be willing to take a couple roll of dice. As Connect Tri-Cities was a huge roll of dice in my mind. And the first year went great, but it didn't go as good as what we thought it was going to be, but it could have just wasn't as bad as a flop, right? And so I think we're gonna have to be creative on our opportunities to go off and try something to see if it works outside the box of us older folks that aren't maybe as technologically savvy and as willing to do that. We just need to be able to bring the creative minds in and let us do it and just try, right? COVID's been a great example. We're sitting here on Zoom, right? We would not have done this had it not been COVID to force us to go do that. And I think that just is an area where it just says, what's the opportunity for possible?
And one of the things that I've thought about, and you touched on it earlier, is I think a lot of times, I also grew up here in the Tri-Cities, and back when I was growing up, there was, in many respects, Hanford was the big game in town, and everybody sort of knew about the Hanford site. Even if maybe they couldn't talk about what was going on out there, everybody knew that, the Hanford site was a big part of the community. And a lot of folks still do, but, I don't know if that always translates down to kids who were in middle school or in high school. And so Connect Tri-Cities and other efforts to help young people better understand that there are opportunities out there. Although it's a cleanup closure site, you can have an entire career doing very meaningful, good work out at the Hanford site. And I think sometimes even kids who are maybe perhaps interested in the past have struggled to figure out how best to sort of get connected to the site. And so things like Connect Tri-Cities, I think are great. And then you also mentioned WSU Tri-Cities, and between WSU Tri-Cities, CBC, and a lot of the apprenticeship programs, I've seen just over the last few years that there's been a lot of very thoughtful and intentional work to try to help folks make that transition from, high school or from a different career to, whatever education or training they need, and then make that seamless transition to the Hanford site. My wife got her engineering degree from WSU Tri-Cities. Kind of sounds like pretty similar to your experience in that, she had an internship, and then that internship turned into a full-time job after she graduated. And I think the more that we can do that, it's like that's a great win-win again for the Hanford site, getting people who want to be there and stay there for the long term, but also for the community.
Yeah, I don't think it's just the Hanford site. I think it's the community, right? And so, one of the things that I think the community has done well, we have a skilled labor need 100% of the time, and it's only going to get worse as time goes by. And I think our skilled labor workforce around the Tri-Cities has done a really good job over the last few years about getting in at the elementary and middle school and high school levels to show them what the skilled labor abilities are out there. But I think also that same conversation is also the seed that allows somebody to become an engineer or a business person also, because when you're young and you have an engineer come in and want to talk to you about math and calculations, I'm sorry, most kids don't like that, right? But when you come in and can show them how that was calculations engineering, allow them to build electrical systems or water systems or those kind of things, I think that just increases their passion to make school important, right? That then allow that opportunity. And I think the Tri-Cities has done pretty well with that in the last few years. I think there's a lot more opportunities to go, and I don't think it ever ends. And I think that partnership, which Connect Tri-Cities allowed that to happen, to pull skilled labor together with degrees and educations and those type of things. Because I was one of those kids, right? I doubt I would have went to college had I not had a scholarship opportunity. I would have been a much better suited person at that time to have gone into to be a skilled labor. My father was a pipe fitter during the first part of his career, and so it's just timing. And I think we just need to continue to partnership together in the whole community and look at it as a community, right? You talk about Hanford being the big thing in the past when we were kids. It's no longer the big thing. It is an important thing, and it is a pretty large piece, but you got Hanford, you got PNNL, you got the agricultural industry, you got the manufacturing communities, you got the Energy Northwest community. There's so much, and we're all looking for those same skilled people in those areas that there's just so much opportunity for us to partner and leverage together versus trying to do it all by ourselves. It just gets untapped in our community. So
that's a good point, Bob. I really appreciate what you said about culture and trying to integrate that culture. And obviously it's part of the new organization's name, but I've heard you talk before, and I know it's a big part, I think, of this cultural integration you're talking about the One Hanford initiative. Is that, am I reading that into it, or is One Hanford kind of talking about the same thing? And then I think, can you tell us a little bit about culture? Like, how do you change that culture? I mean, you talked about the training that happens at Hammer in different places, but how do you change that culture? I mean, that's we've all been through, examples of that, and it's a pretty tough road to hoe, I think. But how's that going? So One Hanford, and then how do you change the culture? What's the plan?
Boy, so two things. That is a big question. So the first one is One Hanford. Yes, One Hanford is that integration, and we're a part of that integration, and I think it's really important that we emulate that. And I think it starts with the top leadership. I think, frankly, it starts with Brian Vance, right? So, for the Hanford site, and he's embraced that and supported that. And I think it starts with that, and it starts filtering down from there. And the good news is, I think, bad news, good news, COVID happened. COVID forced the contractors to all act in a very concise and integrated manner, and it forced all the contractors at that time to work together. And to be honest with you, the leaders across the other prime contractors have been incredible, right? I mean, I would not have thought we would have integrated and teamed together as well as we did, as fast as we did, and COVID kind of drove that. So it's forced us to be more one Hanford-ish. That doesn't mean that we are. We still got a lot of, culturally, we got a lot of legwork to go. And I think culturally, what it comes with, establishing the precedent, setting the vision, setting what you want from that vision, and then starting to put in action in both deeds, words, and actions what you're going to do. And then it's just time. And I think it's time to look at, evaluate, and take that kind of continuous improvement and adaptation to it. Every book you read or wherever you look at talks about a true culture change is somewhere between a 3 and a 5 year journey. And if you kind of plot that 3 to 5 years out from about a year ago or so, maybe you kind of look at that. David's comment earlier, DF law is where you would think maybe where that culture now is together and set up. And so good news is, from setting the vision, nice vision to set is we got to get DF law running. And that is all hands on deck to be looking at that. And so you can paint a vision that people can work to. And Brian Vance and DOE has done that. And I think we're all kind of aligning to that and are somewhere in that process of moving our way through that. But culturally, I think it's a sign of that at the top level. As you go down into the lower tiers of the organizations, is encouraging, coaching, mentoring, and in some cases bringing in supplemental skill mix to help foster that, right? If you don't know what you don't know because you've never seen it before, can you get somebody in that's seen it before, what you're looking for, and help you kind of commingle those together? So it's kind of a combination of all of the above from that regard. So it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, our contract, the way we had bid it, the way we laid it up, was around a one Hanford approach. Matter of fact, we used the words one Hanford in our stuff before this came out. The good news is that aligned very well with what was coming out and what Brian set up at the thing. And I think that's really where the Hanford site's going. We're just on that journey, right? And I'm not too sure it'll ever end, but we're certainly on that journey right now. And DF law allows us to at least be something out a little bit in the distance to be able to work our way through to allow us to assemble around, are we integrating, are we acting as one Hanford to make this happen? That allows us to ask those questions and do continuous when we're not. What do we got to do to adjust? So
yeah, well, that's awesome. What, maybe kind of shifting back to what you talked about earlier about the opportunity and the integration of just the whole Tri-Cities community, and Hanford and Hanford contractors, DOE, federal funding, the integration. Now we're a really more diverse economy, more diverse community. But what are things that TRIDEC could do to help both you and HMIS, support your mission and achieving your goals? But then from that broader community basis that you talked about, what are some things, maybe that we could work on together as we look the next, 5 or 10 years?
Sure. So I think where TRIDEC can help, and I think TRIDEC has done this, I just think we need to continue to work with it, is I think it gets back to one Hanford and an integration perspective. I think the one thing that TRIDEC has done well for is to help carry the Hanford message well, right? In the past, it used to be a lot of fighting for money. I mean, it hasn't been that in so many recent years, which is good, but I still think it's understanding what we're trying to get Hanford to do in the 3 year, 5 year, 7 year span, and how do we best continue to evolve and do that. I think secondarily is the stuff that we just been talking about. Is TRIDEC is great about assembling how do we bring in capacity or capabilities. We talked about kids and people and individual skills, but it's also the supply chain. We're going through it right now today. Literally an hour ago, I was in a meeting where we're talking about building a water treatment plant, and why is it costing us so much money to build this water treatment plant at the Hanford site? And as we're assembling that, in some cases it's because commodities have changed, or because of specialized skills from manufacturing that we're going exterior to this area to go get it. So I think it's kind of a constant evolution of to go bring in technology that you got to go bring from the East Coast versus that you have in a local environment. So I think that's one of the things that TriDex does well, is look at the ability to bring in other skills that we all supplement each other, right? We, between P&L and between Hanford and between the agriculture and the manufacturing, we are pretty high tech, in the Tri-Cities on a smaller scale, but we can always do more and always need more, right? And it's always the last couple of years has been great besides COVID with demand out there, and that demand has shown just how hard that demand is for us to continue to execute, right? And so between the partner and carrying the message and helping with the skills for kids and really the skills to bring in more supply chain capabilities, those are probably the three big hitters in my mind.
That's great. That along those same lines, and you talk about attracting the skills, you talked earlier about talent. I think your story is a really good one in how do we attract the right talent that everybody needs across, not just DOE, Hanford Contractors, P&L, but then all of our other industries, like you talked about, agriculture and manufacturing and technology companies. How are you guys doing on, like you talked about the boomerang effect, they kind of like, it's just desert here, I want to go someplace else. And then they end up coming back. But I know from a year ago almost, when I went through the interview process, talking with Regional Chamber of Commerce and Visit Tri-Cities, that obviously we're right there in the same building, but we talked with all of us, like, how can we help support everybody in the Tri-Cities to retain talent? And I think a lot of what ideas that we kick around is that young people that are right out of college and they're engineers, or they have maybe a technical degree, they don't get a chance to kind of integrate into town. Obviously with COVID, it's a different thing, but, is there something that we could all do together with, your new hires or something to try to bring them into the community and show them what we have to offer, to make sure that they're aware of that they don't, just kind of get into a work mode like we all do when we get out of college and, put our head down and go to work and then go like, oh, I don't know if I like it here. And then just, go to Seattle or something. So are there maybe things that we could work together on that to help kind of everybody build and retain and attract talent through, balancing out and kind of like showing the community off, if you will, to make sure that we don't lose that talent that, you've attracted?
Sure. There's two things that really jump out at me to begin with, right? I talked about culture change earlier, and it doesn't have to do with the community talent part, but it does have to do with a culture change from us in the industry. And I say us in the industry in a way that's, when I came in, and I've been fairly successful, moved around in my career, but in some cases I would have to wait 2 to 5 years for an opportunity to go to the next level, right? Yeah. We have a society of younger kids, and society, I think, has driven us to this because that want things much more rapidly and are demanding of that, and the market has been able to support that, right? I mean, iPhone, I can go to my iPhone and look everything up in a minute and a half. When I was, when I first started out, I would have to go find papers or go to the library to look something up on the microfiche or something like that, right? So that they are looking for more opportunities much more rapidly. And I don't think culturally we've adapted to that as a whole. And so we're getting some of those boomerangs of people moving around, in part because they say, hey, I'm a year in, and I think I'm ready for the next level. And we say, give me 2 more years, right? So yeah. They don't like that. So, that's just something to have in the back of the ground as we look at things. But from the community itself, one of the things that I find interesting, I love the Tri-Cities, and I'm in my 52 years old. I've been married for multiple years, and have a great wife and kids. And I'm not out looking for the 10 o'clock to midnight nightlife that you can go out and enjoy. I think one of the things that the Tri-City loses is when you bring a 20-some-year-old kid from an area that they have in the industry, I think it struggles to resonate. It's a great place to raise families. It's a great place to do that. But from a nightlife perspective, it doesn't have a lot of pizzazz right now, right? And I know there's some things that are being worked on that, but that's just a vulnerability that we just generally have in the Tri-Cities, right? And so I've had some people come to work for me that are midlife professionals in their mid-30s or 40s that are single, and in this community, works really well for the family, but not necessarily for the single person, either young or midlife in that regard. And so Bob's opinion, we've lost people because they go, wow, right, I got to go to Seattle, or I got to go to Spokane, or I got to, so one of the things I try to say is, you drop a pin in this area and draw a two-hour circle around it, you can be pretty much anywhere you want to be. The problem is you got to drop a 2-hour circle to be pretty much anywhere you want to be. And some of it the Tri-Cities has, but some of it you got to go to Bluewood to ski, or you got to go to Seattle to be on the coast. If you want to have big shows, it's just that's an area. Our waterfront there's some stuff going on our waterfront, some things that were in the mix that makes our waterfront more attractive to folks, to where you don't have to have your own personal boat to be out on a boat kind of thing, right? And so I just think that's an area where back to where we continue to evolve, what we got to continue to look at, right? So that's a lot of our folks have left for those type of reasons. So
yeah. Well, I think David's got a question, but I just want to add really quick that I think that's a great point, especially on the development cycle for young people. And, it has been a huge cultural shift that I think, older generations need to embrace. I mean, you talked about starting with Westinghouse, right? A long time ago worked for a big company, Caterpillar, and those big companies just have that thought of like, you come in right out of college and then, 40, 50, 30 years later, you get the gold watch and you retire, and young people have a different expectation. And so they're ready for it. How do we like leverage that, to your point? I appreciate what you said before about thinking about like, this is a development position. We got to be ready for them to move on. And if you structure each of those positions to do that, hopefully we can all make that cultural shift from, more of a top down. It's already happening from the bottom up, but I think that's a great point.
And I think you prepare them with the understanding you're probably going to lose them at some point. But if you prepare them and take care of them really, really well, and it's the relational part, not the technical part, right? The relational part that says you cared for them, you take care of them, you gave them the opportunities, and when they left, you encourage them to leave because it's a great opportunity for them. And that people remember that. They don't forget that. So when another opportunity comes back around 5 years later and you call that person up and say, hey, I have a new opportunity for you, they're like, okay, right, now I'm embraceful of that, right? So you're taking care of the person as the person, knowing that you're going to reap the benefit of that as time goes by from the business perspective, where I think in the past it was, I'm taking care of you only because it's a business perspective. And it's a relational difference perspective, just as a society that we've had to go through, and we're still going through it, right? So
yeah, that's a good point.
But I've had a chance to participate in a number of conversations about sort of workforce development across the DOE complex. And one of the things I sometimes think about is, when you look at how all of this started, and especially at the Hanford site, it goes back to the Manhattan Project. And in the Manhattan Project, we as a nation really did bring in the best and the brightest, not only from the United States, from other parts of the world too, to solve this incredibly complex challenge. And Bob, you talked about sort of telling the Hanford story, and that's one of the things that we like to do too. And one of the things that we like to share is that it's different than the Manhattan Project, but the challenge that we're trying to address here at Hanford is also really incredibly complex. And we really still do need those best and the brightest, and we need to keep them and retain them and attract them in the first place. I think one of the challenges is that we do have sort of competition from San Francisco's and Seattle's of the world, and different employers who can provide a very different workplace environment where you have a ping pong table in your in your lobby and that sort of thing. But I think one of especially among younger people, there's this altruistic nature to what they want to invest their time and their energy in, and solving the kind of problems that we have to address, and leaving the environment better than we found it. I think that's something that can be very attractive. So I think it's a very interesting process and challenge that we have, but I feel like we've made a lot of headway, and it's good to hear folks like you and others in the senior leadership positions at contractors and at DOE. We're kind of thinking along these lines about how do we do that? How do we keep these folks, and how do we make the workplace best fit kind of what they're wanting to do and spend their careers in. So,
well, and David, you make a really good point. So back in the Manhattan days, they went and attracted the best talent that was out there and some of the best minds that were out there. And they used the ability to attract them to say, bring your family out here and we'll do things like pay your breakfast, lunch, and dinners. And they have mess halls that you saw back in there, right? And so you had some really unique things that go off and do that you took really good care of those folks, right? Today's world that we live in, you know, for the government sides of the house, you don't have those levers to pull while you're competing against those that do have those levers to pull. What I mean by that is your example ping pong table, right? We can't attract somebody that bring them in that says, hey, you know what, we're going to have pop in every room and we're going to have ping pong tables, and you know, you can go sit outside on your AirPod hammock and kind of just contemplate life, as long as you're kind of creatively coming up with that, because the taxpayers don't, you know, as taxpayers, we don't want that, right? We want accountability. We want our taxpayers' dollars spent really, really wisely. So that really limits us down. So now you have to go to somebody and help show them why they want to be part of this, knowing that you don't have that lever to pull. The lever we do have to pull is the lever of how you fit into, like you say, altruistic. There are people that are out there that want to make a difference in the world. They want to clean the world up. Environmental is a very big, important thing. For us, for Hanford, this is the biggest environmental cleanup job in the world, right? Top to bottom. So you got to use that, and you got to harbor that to get to them, to show them their interest. Kind of like a teacher, right? Teachers don't teach because they're getting paid a lot of money. They teach because they have a passion to make a difference in the teaching world. We got to find the people that want to have environmental remediation and clean up, you know, to society as part of that, not that you get this ping pong table and other things. And so if you go there to hire the person that wants the ping pong table with all of the little bells and whistles and be able to think tank versus the person that is more altruistic, you stand a better chance of one versus the other. And we've been shifting our focus over to what we do control and what we can control, because that's just part of it, right? So like it or not, that's just the cards we're dealt and what you have to deal with. So.
Great point. That's just down to about 3 minutes. We'll maybe one more question and wrap up, but I got to ask you, Bob, what did you play at high school and at Montana State? What was your position?
Oh, I played running back. So that was always my passion, right? So I grew up loving Walter Payton, and then eventually Barry Sanders, and you know, I probably was a better suited to be a receiver. I was a little small for a running back, but that's just what I loved, right? So I loved everything about it, and so that was my passion. So
nice. Well, I got to say,
now I'm bald and gray from all the hits I took, I think, right? So.
I was in Chicago when Walter Payton passed away, man, and that city shut down. I mean, like, you talk about, you know, a sports really leader that had an impact on a whole community, man. He was amazing. We lived out, or our plant was out in Aurora, and they had this old railroad roundhouse that they converted to Walter Payton's roundhouse, and they had his Hall of Fame and all his memorabilia. It's really, really cool if you ever get a chance to go out there. I mean, Walter Payton's amazing. He's
the one, to be honest with you, when I was a little kid, I was not a great reader. Didn't like reading. My parents struggled to get me to read. And the only reason why they really got me to start reading and becoming more is because they started putting Sports Illustrated and sports books and Walter Payton books and Walter Payton stuff. And so, you know, I assimilate to my ability to read and learn was in part because of that man, just because of, I found him so, on how he played so intriguing, but how he was as a person so intriguing. I had posters of him all over my walls, and I cut out things of the Sports Illustrated and stuck them up on my walls. And so, you know, that, you know, there's always those people that bring passion to what you do. And frankly, basketball was my passion all the way up until I got into about my freshman or sophomore year in high school. And I switched to football in part because of Walter Payton, but more importantly, because I had a coach at Kennewick High. A lot of people know him, legendary coach Ed Troxel, right? And so, you know, that man sparked a passion in me that more from a person and taking care of a person, almost back to the talent part that we talked about. If you take care of people, people don't forget that, right? And so, you know, that man turned my life at a time when I could have went a different path, because I was, you know, I ran with two different crowds, a really good crowd and a really bad crowd at that younger age. And I very easily could have taken a bad path. And I was very fortunate that he touched my life at the right time. And so, you know, it passing along kind of thing. So
that's awesome. Well, Bob, it's time to wrap up. We're right at time, but we really appreciate your time today. It's really I mean, this has been a great conversation. I think that's what's so good about doing these things on Fridays. We just have a chance to have a little more of a in-depth conversation and, you know, just talk about these important things that are going on for the Tri-Cities. And, you know, in your case, you know, with the new organization at HMIS, but thanks for being on. And do you have a closing statement you want to leave us with today?
No, Karl, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was a little nervous about talking to you for an hour. So I'm still I'm still looking at the clock going, wow, did I actually can blather and blabber that much for an hour, a long period of time? I'm not too sure it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do appreciate the time to talk with you, Karl. And you know, I think my wrap up is, you know, there's two things to me that come out important for me as an individual, but I think it's also important for our company as what we do is, we're a very team. Under MSA, we talk about family a lot. Under HMIS, we're going to talk about family. And I think that family is a couple tiers deep, right? I think it's a company family, but I think it's a Hanford family. And I also think it's a Tri-City community family. And I think it's, you know, it's just like I'll allude to a normal family. You have your own knit family that live in your house, but then you have your parents that live around you that's in a family. And then you have your larger family. And you know, I look at life that way to a degree, and I think our company and a lot of our leaders here together that we've kind of all kind of see it that way. And so, and it gets back to Tri-Cities is hurting, Hanford's hurting, and you know, and the company's hurting, and it goes the other way around, right? If everybody's successful and we're being successful, we all benefit by that. And I think as long as we kind of continue to look at that and look for those win-win opportunities together, I think that's going to be important for us to move forward. And that the world drives us to do that now, and the community, and for us to be successful as a company, as a Hanford, as a Tri-City community, we have to do that. Otherwise, we're going to lose to somebody else, right? So
that's a great point. Well, Bob, thanks for your time, and you know, we appreciate your story, your time today, and you know, your support for TRIDEC. We couldn't do it without you, and you know, all of our other members. So appreciate your time. Have a great Friday, and we'll see everybody back here next Friday.
all right, Karl, David, talk to you guys later. See you guys.
Thanks.
Guys.